right, so the goal of this worksheet itself is to help you organize and present the information that you've learned in the course to any audience. That's what a PowerPoint is, right? Like if you've had to give a PowerPoint or a presentation either in class or at work, you know that you're using it to kind of distill the most important or key information for your audience. And that's what we're asking you to do with the topic you've been working on. Unlike in later classes, you are not writing a research or source-driven paper. Instead, you are presenting it. So that introduction you wrote last week, you're going to use to gain ideas for this, but you're not actually going to write the rest of the paper. I know in last term, I actually had a student who just started writing the paper, did not look ahead at the time, and was really disappointed when she found out that, no, we are doing a presentation instead. Okay, and so the other goal of this specific assignment is to help get you ready for Project 3, due at the end of Theme 4. All right, so step 1, as always, go to 711 and download the Multimedia Presentation Planning Worksheet. Review the instructions and note that there are parts 1 and parts 2 that must be completed. Part 2, as I'll explain in a second, kind of goes off into another page when you download it, so you need to remember to scroll down and fully complete that. So part 1 is brainstorm. The instructions are brainstorm your thoughts on each question in preparation for creating an outline of your multimedia presentation, including specific examples as appropriate. So you're coming up with general ideas. I'm going to give you guidelines for what your ultimate goal is, and these are just general ideas that you're brainstorming. So first, in bold, I have the categories, and then not in bold, I have the questions that you want to ask and what you want to do for each section. So state 3 historical lenses that could be applied to your topic and explain how each lens can be applied. Well, we have spent a lot of time in our class focused on 3 lenses: economic, political, and social. There are also multiple other lenses. I know in our discussion boards, students talked about the military lens, a scientific lens. So these different lenses can be used. There's absolutely nothing wrong with using those lenses. But the 3 main ones, and so the ones that most students rely on when they're doing this project, are the economic, political, and social, just because I think we spent so much time on them that people feel very comfortable with them. So state 3 historical lenses that could be applied to your topic and explain how each lens can be applied. For this, my suggestion is that you write 1 sentence or bullet point to explain how each of these lenses can be applied to your topic. So this slide would have just 3 bullet points, right? 1 for each lens, like economic dash, and then explain how it could be applied. Political dash, what would I be looking for? Social dash, what would I be looking for? All right, part 1, brainstorming. Part 1 is very long. Part 2 is actually long, but part 2, you can copy and paste a lot from part 1. So describe how one of the lenses you just identified might change how the research plan and introduction you previously admitted in Project 2 are written. So this is where I'm saying that even though you're not going to write more from the research plan or introduction, you are going back to it and you're going to explain how just focusing on one lens changes what you're doing. So you pick one of the lenses and you write 3 to 5 sentences or bullet points to explain why using only one of the lenses would change the questions you ask, because that's the research plan, right? So the questions you are asking, the sources you might use, and how you approach the topic. That's what you want that section to tell you. So 3 to 5 sentences or bullet points, just explaining why or how just using one of those lenses are going to change everywhere that you're approaching this. The sources, the questions, all of that. Okay? Part 1, brainstorming, goes on. Discuss the conclusions you can draw from thinking about how history is told. Consider how the context of historians' own time periods might influence or bias how they describe historical events. This should be coming from the historical context chart that we worked on. Now, I know that students sometimes have difficulties, not quite sure how to do the historical context charts because they are focusing more on what's happening when the bomb is dropped. But for the historical context chart, we want to know if the article was written in 2007, well, was there something happening between 2003 to 2006 that might influence how the author views the dropping of the bomb because he's shaped or she is shaped by current events. So, my suggestion for you is if you did well on your historical context chart to take it out and to take 2 of those examples and in 2 to 3 sentences or bullet points, explain how they shaped it. So I would do 1 bullet point explaining how, just in general, current events can shape someone, an author, a historian. And then I would do 1 or 2 bullet points with specific examples from your historical context chart. Now, if you had trouble with your historical context chart, then I would reach out to your instructor or to us in the learning community. And when you do that, make sure you provide an example of what you did. And if you're not sure what you're supposed to do, explain that. If you don't, check the feedback from your instructor because they might explain it enough. And if so, rework it and email that new idea to your instructor and say, is this right? Because this is what's really going to help this part of the assignment, of the presentation, really, it's going to make it strong. If you can give a specific example, like, oh, well, in 1955, and right now I think it's Miles or Morden, writing during the Cold War and after the Korean War is influenced into the necessity of us having a strong nuclear presence because we are still fighting the Soviet Union. Something like that is going to really help. And right there, that's an example of how current events for Morden or Miles shape how they see the dropping of the bomb. And that's what that chart was supposed to do, and that's what we want to work on with this slide. All right. So again, I would bring a question to your instructor or the learning community or the peer tutor, but when you do, give an example of what you did and then give an example of what you think you're supposed to do, because that helps us kind of focus in more than just saying, I'm not sure what to do with this. All right. So, describe how your research of a historical topic can help you understand contemporary issues and try to list at least 2 related contemporary issues. So for this one, we want you to provide 2 current events and explain how just knowing how to do historical research has changed how you view these events. So you've spent a month and a half now going through primary and secondary sources, asking about bias of primary and secondary sources, asking about how primary and secondary sources are influenced by different political lenses, so that some might ask this question, others might not ask that question, and also how primary and secondary sources are influenced by current events. So we want to know, in general, not related to the dropping of the bomb, how has spending so much time thinking about bias and lenses and influence from current events shaped how you look at the world right now? I gave an example that, for example, and this one I gave because I have found that students who kind of latched onto this for the presentation, it really made it concrete and therefore easy to explain on their slides. But so you may want to consider if historical research has made you a more critical thinker when it comes to like news media reports. I'm sure we've all seen a lot of discussion in the news and the media on fake news and other questions on bias in news. Does one news station favor one from the election, but one candidate more than the other? All of those questions. So from our course, what we want you now to be able to do is think about, oh, well, should I find, for example, the original event that is being talked about and try to find a transcript or a video of the original event so I can make my own conclusions as opposed to just believing what this newspaper article is telling me? Or is the secondary source that I'm using, is it from a very biased news media or website? And is there a better, less biased one? And I'm not, obviously everything is biased, so I'm not saying non-biased, but I'm saying that there are some that are very far on each side. So is there 1 or 2 closer to the middle on each side that might be better for me? I have all my students in the first or second week, it depends when we have discussion, take a quiz that reveals confirmation bias. And so that means that when we read an article, we stop reading once we agree with it. So we don't keep looking because we're just like, oh, well, this must be right because I agree with it. But that means we might not be getting the whole picture. So for this, I have found that students do really well when they latch on to like a story in the media that they maybe investigated further because they have now learned these historical research skills to question bias or lens or the influence of current events. And you've also, by this point, you now understand the difference between, say, a scholarly peer-edited work, which are the secondary sources that we've given you, and the primary sources, and why do we ask you to use those instead of just allowing you to kind of Google it on the internet. All right, that turned out to be a really long explanation of one slide, but again, it's going to be 3 to 5 sentences or bullet points. After taking this course, what do you think about the statement, history repeats itself? Do you think it's accurate? What information from the course guides you to this conclusion? This is your opinion. I have had students who have said, no, it is not accurate. And then they tell me why they think that. And that is perfectly fine. As long as you answer the question and you explain what in the course taught you, and again, is it that you have learned more historical thinking skills? And so you are viewing things in different ways? And that's why? Is it because you have always thought that and the course, because of certain things, has reinforced it for you that you're like, nope, that's not right? So do you think this is accurate? Again, this is your opinion as long as you support it. So that's why I'm saying 3 to 5 sentences or bullet points, because you have to back up. You can't just say, yes, history repeats itself, or no, history doesn't repeat itself. This is not accurate. You have to give more information. But you don't have to say it is accurate. I, again, have had several students who have said, no, it is not accurate, and then they explain why, and then that's it. That's fine. That is their argument. Okay. Discuss your obligation as a citizen of your society to understand the history behind issues that impact you every day. This is another opinion question. So you can say that you do have an obligation. So what is an obligation? An obligation, in this context, as a citizen of your society. I went with country, but it's whether you have an obligation or duty or requirement as a citizen or resident of your country to understand U.S. history and the history of the world. So obligation means that you should have a duty or requirement. That should just be because you live on this planet, you should have to study this history. Or we live in our society, so we should have to study this history. Again, I've had students who say no, that while they think that everyone should study history, they do not like the idea that it would be an obligation or a duty or requirement to study history. I've had students who say yes, that we're all in this society together, and so we all should be obligated to have to study this. So again, this is up to you. And as long as you can explain it, 3 to 5 sentences or bullet points, you're going to be fine. There is no right answer. That's what my students are. Is there a right answer? Is this the right answer? For this, and for the does history repeat itself, there really is no right answer. It's the answer you believe and how you can support it. All right. Part 2, outline. Instructions. Create a plan for your presentation. You will need to create 10 to 12 slides that respond to the critical elements in the Project 3 rubric. If you're using Microsoft Word, your multimedia presentation should be 4 to 5 pages long. I've never had a student use Microsoft Word, but obviously if you don't have PowerPoint or Prezi is a free online tool, so you could also use that. But if you don't have that, then also there's Google Slides, but you're going to have to be able to download it and upload it. I'm not sure how that works. So the slide title suggestions are provided to help you develop your presentation. So we suggest slide titles. The field for slide text is a place for you to develop your ideas from your presentation's content, drawing from part 1. So basically everything you did in part 1, you're now fitting into these boxes. And I did not include all the boxes. There are, I believe, 10 boxes. So this is how this is done. Historical lenses and history's value. So that's where you're discussing what you showed up in the beginning with the different historical lenses. A description of your topic, 3 historical lenses. You're going to want to go through the Project 3 rubric and also look at the examples that I'm going to put in the learning community to decide. So slide text, you're literally going to copy and paste, like, this is what I would like to have on that slide. Slide visuals and audio ideas are just, I would like to put in this picture, or perhaps there is, for example, the news report from this period, so I would like to include that link in my slide so we could play